Solo Leveling by Gong. Chapter 51 Part 2 The Retreat of Millions and the Counterattack of One. The Hunters Association of Japan headquarters were located at the center of Tokyo, which could be considered the heart of the country. At least, it used to be before the giants had come pouring out of the gate. After his life had been saved by the sacrifices of various hunters and military soldiers during the S-Rank 8 dungeon break in Shinjuku, President Shigeo Matsumoto had moved the association headquarters to Osaka. While it wasn't the southernmost city, President Matsumoto had decided that all hope would be lost for Japan if they weren't able to defend Osaka and its 2.26 million civilians. It was their last line of defense, their Maginot Line, so to speak. Upon hearing that the giants had reached the nearby city of Nagoya, Matsumoto had fallen into despair. Japan was at death's door. Plus, it was futile to plead to the international community for help after the schemes of the Hunters Association of Japan had been brought to light by President Gun Hee-go of Korea. Following President Go's press conference, the Japanese government, which had temporarily moved to Kyoto, had urgently summoned President Matsumoto. He knelt before the politicians demanding he be held accountable. "I am responsible for everything. However, someone must also fix the current situation. Please postpone your verdict until then." The Prime Minister stood with his back to Matsumoto. After a long pause, he consented to the terms. President Matsumoto was undoubtedly to blame for this crisis, but like he'd said, somebody had to resolve the dungeon break. His punishment could come later. He could still be made an example of after the fire was put out. When Jinwoo arrived in Japan, an impassioned President Matsumoto was the first to greet him. Though his own fate had been decided, he couldn't let his country suffer a similar one. Goosebumps erupted all over his body as soon as he set eyes on Jinwoo. No way. Jinwoo was strong. Having met so many powerful people during his tenure as president of the association, he could tell immediately. And although he'd been in the presence of countless strong hunters, very few had made the hair on the back of his neck stand up like this. In fact, this was a first. Had he met Jinwoo prior to the Jeju Island raid, he would have canceled the plan to betray the Korean hunters. Ryuji Goto's assessment of him had been correct. The man before him had a threatening presence. However, his opponents were giant-type magic beasts that had escaped from the S-Rank gate. There was no way Jinwoo was strong enough to deal with them on his own. He pleaded, "Please focus on defending Osaka." He needed Jinwoo to buy him some time for the association to negotiate with the United States or Russia. However, the hunter's reply shattered his plans. "No, thank you." Jinwoo rejected the request. President Matsumoto and the other representatives fell into a panic. Had Jinwoo changed his mind after coming all this way? President Matsumoto cautiously asked. Then what are you planning to do?" In lieu of an answer, Jinwoo divided his minions into 3 groups and mobilized them in different directions before heading off on his own course. The sheer number of minions was mind-blowing, but President Matsumoto swallowed hard for another reason. Is he really planning to confront giants by himself? Was Jinwoo going to attempt something all the other hunters in the world had claimed was impossible? President Matsumoto was left with questions but no answers. All he could do was leave the fate of the country to Providence and wait. President Matsumoto returned to the Hunters Association headquarters to assess the current situation. His question was answered sooner than he expected. "The city of Nagoya has been retaken." "What?" The president sprang up from his chair. Barely any time had passed, so how could Hunter Sum already have defeated one of the giants? And the reports kept pouring in. "A giant corpse has been discovered in the city of Nakatsugawa." The city of Shizuoka has been recovered. Takayama and Nagano as well. Jinwoo and his minions were advancing toward Tokyo at an astounding rate. Chills ran up President Matsumoto's spine as the Korean hunter turned the impossible into reality. He could not calm his pounding heart until finally, Kafu! Hunter-san has arrived in the city of Kafu! President Matsumoto plopped down in his chair at the news that Jinwoo and his minions had reached Kafu, a city a mere 130 kilometers from Tokyo. Sir! President Matsumoto! He couldn't find the strength to stand on his shaking legs. Hunter-san really had been planning to kill the giants by himself. A thought occurred to him. Hunter-san is doing what I had planned to do to Korea. President Matsumoto's plan had been to put the Korean hunters out of commission and use the Japanese hunters to take control. But the tables had turned. The Japanese hunters were in disarray, and the Korean hunter Jinwoo was single-handedly dominating Japan. One man was accomplishing what President Matsumoto, the Hunters Association of Japan, their top-ranked hunters, and even the Japanese government had jointly failed to pull off. The president snapped out of his daze to relay an order to his worried employees. Please leave the room. I would like to be by myself for a while. Alone in the empty room, he hung his head. He had never before experienced this feeling of profound loss that now overwhelmed him. President Matsumoto had been utterly, completely defeated. However, his mind settled after some brief reflection, and his heart filled with endless gratitude. Quietly, he shed a few tears. That day, Jinwoo and his minions headed east from Osaka, defeating all the giants they encountered, and finally arrived in Tokyo. Thud. 2 dead giants fell to the ground. You have leveled up. Jinwoo pumped his fist. He couldn't remember the last time he had leveled up this easily. He clenched his fists. He was heading in a straight line from Osaka to Tokyo, the origin of the dungeon break, and so far, he'd killed 13 giants and leveled up 6 times. Since 1 giant was equal to a boss of any other dungeon, Jinwoo received a huge amount of experience points from every kill. Not to mention, his soldiers were busy killing giants as well, which also contributed to his total. He couldn't help but pump his fist with each notification. And speaking of, you have leveled up. There it is! Jinwoo welcomed the message, which was accompanied by a familiar voice in his head. My king, we have dispatched yet another enemy. It was Baru, whose army of ants was advancing the fastest among the 3 divisions. Considering Baru was his strongest soldier, and the ants made up most of Jinwoo's minions, that was to be expected. Baru tended to report each takedown. Jinwoo praised their accomplishments. Nice. Excellent job. Thank you, my king. Jinwoo then checked the other 2 divisions through sensory sharing. Although not as good as the Ant Army led by Baru, the High Orc Army led by Fong, and the Elite Army led by Igris were proceeding smoothly. Jinwoo was proud of his soldiers leveling up so rapidly. Boss, should we set up camp here for the night? Jinwoo opened his eyes to see Jinho pulling out a tent. Jinwoo looked up and saw that the sun was already setting. He wasn't physically tired thanks to recovery potions and the effects of leveling up, but the mental fatigue was beginning to take a toll. I need some rest. He nodded. This would be their campsite for tonight. The 2 men worked together to quickly pitch the tent and prepare dinner. It was autumn, and a chilly wind was blowing. As he warmed up the meal provided by the Hunters Association of Japan on the fire, Jinwoo mused that winter couldn't be too far off. Winter. He could see Tokyo from here. If he described a civilization's rise and fall according to seasons, Tokyo appeared to be in the middle of its winter. For some reason, the devastated city looked familiar. Where have I seen this before? Jinwoo searched through his memories. The demon's castle. Tokyo looked just like the wasted cities within the demon's castle. Dungeon. The only difference was that Tokyo wasn't on fire. Jinwoo's expression grew dark. Could this be? Every single floor of the demon's castle had shown cities in ruin. Had the architect of the system been implying something? Jinwoo snorted. Well, whatever. The architect was already dead in some dungeon. Jinwoo hadn't had any contact with it since, so there was absolutely no way it had survived. If this was a sign of things to come, he'd just have to stop it. The sole reason he'd amassed power was because he didn't want to be outmatched by anyone. He had leveled up, acquired skills, and leveled up again to finally arrive at this point. Bottom. The black heart leaped as if responding to his thoughts. Jinwoo placed a hand on his chest and smiled faintly as he felt his heart's beat. A doctor at the hospital had told him that there was nothing strange about him. Nothing abnormal here. You're perfectly healthy, Hunter-san. Jinwoo had gotten a full checkup the night before he left Korea. Although the doctor had scanned Jinwoo's chest twice, he hadn't spotted anything out of the ordinary. The black heart wasn't any kind of physical change. Even though Jinwoo could feel it beating, it didn't actually exist. That sounds crazy. Jinwoo laughed in spite of himself. He was relieved to hear that he was anatomically the same as everyone else. But then where was this heartbeat coming from? A gentle breeze blew toward them from downtown Tokyo, carrying an immeasurably scary and almost sticky mana. Boss! Jinho looked uncomfortable. The mana was so powerful, even Jinho with his low perception had picked up on it. Jinwoo silently nodded. The wind had obviously originated from the giant guarding the gate in Shinjuku. Compared to the energy exuded by the other giants Jinwoo had dealt with so far, this felt completely different and sent goosebumps up his arms. But Jinwoo had to laugh. The black heart pounded in his chest as if in response to the giant's mana. Once he defeated this enemy, how many levels would he advance? And what kind of shadow soldier would it be? Jinwoo couldn't wait. Igris's elite and Ice Bear armies were the first to arrive in Tokyo, followed by Fong's High Work army. Igris spotted their approach and greeted them with a nod. Fong grinned under the hood of his robe and nodded in return. Soon after, stomp, stomp, stomp. The sound of marching preceded the large group of shadow soldiers emerging through the light fog. It was Baru's army of ants. They had taken the longest route and killed the most giants, and so were the last to arrive in Tokyo. Igris greeted Baru, who led the ants. Baru, however, walked past Igris and approached Jinwoo from behind, respectfully dropping down on one knee. Oh, the gang's all here! Jinwoo tore his gaze from the giant in the distance. You did well, everyone. As he welcomed his shadow soldiers, those who could follow Baru's example, and knelt on one knee. The ice bears weren't built to move like that, so they lowered their bodies and touched their noses to the ground. There stood all the humanoid, bear, ant, high work, naga, and other types of shadow soldiers Jinwoo had collected until now. They numbered close to 1,000. Everyone on your feet! The soldiers stood with a gesture of Jinwoo's hand. It was quite an amazing sight. Jinho was blown away as he took it in. Good thing they're the boss's minions. If they were actual magic beasts. He couldn't help but tremble at the thought of this assemblage of powerful magic beasts loose in the world. He was glad they were his allies, a word befitting Jinwoo more than anyone he knew. However, there was an even more awe-inspiring sight behind him. Jinho swallowed hard as he nervously looked over his shoulder. There stood a giant, the likes of which was completely different from the ones he had seen up to now. The magic beast's head was so far from the ground, it could be mistaken for a skyscraper. Whoa! Jinho couldn't help but gasp. There was a huge difference between seeing it in a video versus in real life. His mouth hung open in shock. Jinwoo patted the top of Jinho's head with a laugh. Careful, your jaw is about to fall off. B-boss! Jinho snapped out of it and scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. Jinwoo inspected the giant. How could such a thing exist? It was an impossibly big creature. Jinwoo felt an urge to flee as quickly as possible because of the terrifying energy emanating from it. He was getting an ominous feeling about this. There were usually two ways to shake this kind of foreboding: run away and hide from the source, or eliminate it. His choice had been made from the moment he'd left Korea. No, from the moment he'd reawakened. Ba-dump, be-a-dump. He briefly closed his eyes and enjoyed the sound of his heartbeat, then addressed Jinho. Stay far. Roger that. Jinho resolutely nodded and hurried away, past the ranks of the Shadow soldiers. Okay then. Jinwoo waited until Jinho was far enough before summoning the newest members of his family. Come forth. Though not as big as the boss giant, the Shadow soldiers that emerged were still hulking figures. Jinwoo named the number 1 through 13 in order of extraction. With them comprising the front line, his army seemed all the more infallible. That should do it. His preparations complete, Jinwoo raised his hand high toward the sky, and the Shadow soldiers prepared to attack. My soldiers! His minions were either clad in black armor or covered in black smoke. Jinwoo looked at each in turn, then faced the giant in the distance. It gazed down at him indifferently, as if disinterested in anyone not within swatting distance. I definitely don't like this. Jinwoo didn't appreciate being looked down upon. A feral grin spread across his face, and he pointed his hand toward the giant. Advance! Baru flung his head back and screeched. Scraya! The army charged forward as one. Rumble! The ground shook with the sound of rolling thunder, and dust flew into the air. Finally, Jinwoo's soldiers entered the giant's domain. As soon as they did, the space around them changed. What the? Jinwoo couldn't help but yell. The giant vanished for a split second, and upon its reappearance, half of Jinwoo's soldiers had been eliminated. Sliding? The giant had slid across the space with his legs outstretched in an incredibly destructive move. He had had the single mass of soldiers, but they wouldn't let the giant off that easily. The enlarged fawn got right in its face before the dust had settled. Whoop! Fawn inhaled deeply and spat out a pillar of fire. Boom! This would have melted any magic beasts vulnerable to flame, but the giant managed to block the fiery blast with the palm of his hand. Jinwoo could feel Fawn's shock. The giant grabbed a soldier by the ankle. Ordinarily the size of a building, the minion looked like a child in the giant's grip. It threw the soldier at Fawn before he could attack again, sending the two crashing hard into each other. Jinwoo's eyes narrowed as Fawn vanished in a puff of black smoke. The 1,000 versus 1 battle between Jinwoo's army and the giant had officially begun, but it was more aptly described as a one-sided display of violence. He! Arg! The soldiers were getting pummeled by the giant. With each move of its fists, palms, elbows, knees, heels, and feet, it wiped out dozens of soldiers. Bam! 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 The giant moved faster than the most agile hunter ever could. Scraw! Upon seeing the giant crushing ants underfoot, Baru started dashing toward it, only to be stopped by Jinwoo. Not yet! Baru took a step back. He and Igris flanked Jinwoo, awaiting his command, but it was obvious that both were itching to join the fray. It's not time yet. Jinwoo pursed his lips. Despite the enormous boost from the Black Heart, his mana was rapidly consumed as his soldiers continuously regenerated. However, Jinwoo stood fast and calmly observed the giant. His plan was to try and figure out his opponent's weakness, using his immortal army as bait. Wham! The giant crushed Shadow soldiers under its knee and pounded the ground with its fist. Boom! The streets shook like an earthquake, dissipating countless soldiers into black smoke. With the giant's perfect defense and vicious attacks, the battle was like something straight out of a nightmare. But it wasn't a complete loss. In the middle of the desolate metropolis, Jinwoo's eyes glinted as he concentrated. I knew it. The giant's hard skin was encased by a thin, armor-like layer of mana that deflected any damage, so the giant was recklessly attacking without even trying to protect itself. However, there had been one instance where it acted in self-defense. When Fong had used Fire Dragon's breath, the giant had shielded its face with its hands. What if that wasn't a reflex? Kaisel! Jinwoo summoned the flying dragon. Kaisel burst out of Jinwoo's shadow and spread his large wings. Flop! Kree! Jinwoo got on Kaisel's back. Baru! Igris! Baru extended his own wings, and Igris got on behind Jinwoo. With both passengers on board, Kaisel flapped his wings. Kree! They rose into the air. Let's go! The four of them shot straight toward the giant's head. The giant's eyes shifted to one side. Even though the beast was occupied with battling 1,000 Shadow soldiers, it spotted Kaisel and Baru heading for it at top speed. Jinwoo nodded to himself. He was now certain it had the same ability he did to seemingly slow down time. That was how the boss giant was able to move much faster than the others of its kind. The giant began turning toward them. Get out of the way! Jinwoo and Igris leaped off Kaisel's back just as the giant's fist struck. Pow! Jinwoo's eye twitched as Kaisel disintegrated. It wasn't fun watching his soldiers being destroyed, but the silver lining was that his target was now within reach. Igris attacked first. He swung the Demon Monarch's sword downward in midair. ZZZZT! Blue lightning streaked from the blade toward the giant's forehead. The beast tilted its head back to avoid the blast. Again! The magic beast dodged a second lightning strike to its face. Certain that the giant's weakness was its face, Jinwoo drew himself toward it using ruler's authority. Baru followed close behind. Demon Monarch's daggers. Jinwoo tightly gripped the weapons that appeared in both hands, and Baru extended his claws. Together, they launched a joint attack. The ground soldiers finished regenerating and went after the giant's ankles. Kablam! Boom! Flame shot out of the hands of the mage soldiers and exploded on contact with their target. Lightning struck, pillars of fire scorched, soldiers bit and clawed at its body. Jinho intently watched the unbelievable battle unfold, not missing a beat. He was rendered speechless. This was no longer a fight between a hunter and a magic beast. It was a battle of monster versus monster. A magic beast as tall as a skyscraper versus a hunter commanding 1,000 minions. It was hard to decide which was more monstrous. Oh man! Jinho felt it was a waste that he was the only one around to witness the clash between these two titans. He tried to calm himself while keeping his attention glued to Jinwoo. Just then, Jinwoo's dagger stabbed the giant in the eye. SHHK. The giant reeled, flailing its head in pain, but Jinwoo wouldn't let go. It's working. He held on tightly to the dagger lodged in the giant's eye and activated a skill. Mutilation. SHHK. His other dagger shredded the giant's eyeball. The magic beast's torso writhed violently, but Jinwoo hung on. The hunter looked over his shoulder as he dangled from the giant's eye. "Baru." "As you wish, sire." On command, Baru flew straight into the opening his master had created. With Jinwoo on the outside and Baru on the inside, the two began tearing the giant's face apart. The giant opened its mouth wide in a silent scream. Ants began attacking its immobile feet. Whump! The giant dropped to its knees as one of the tendons on its ankles was severed. Thud! The ground shook at the sudden dispersion of weight. Despite it all, Jinwoo and Baru continued their attack. Mutilation! Mutilation. Mutilation. The giant struggled in agony, but to no avail, and eventually, it stopped resisting. Its body slowly began tilting to one side until, kaboom! The giant's body crashed to the ground. A familiar electronic chime sounded. Ping! You have defeated an enemy. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. You have leveled up. Jinwoo raised his fist in victory. Yes! He gently landed on the ground and let out a sigh of relief, but then stopped dead in his tracks as he noticed something odd. Huh?